Hello. Today is Good Friday, and I've been meaning to make a video all morning, and now I think I have found the time to be able to speak to you. Um, as I said, today is Good Friday, so there is the um, public killing of one man, which happened thousands of years ago, which is on the minds of many, many millions of us, even as we are living at a time when illness and death is spreading and is continuing to spread across countries, across nations, not respecting any national borders. So, especially today, and especially this year, Good Friday is more than ever connected with suffering, with death. And when I was thinking about the crucifixion this morning, I also thought, isn't it also the case that perhaps one of the reasons why Christ had to pay for what he did with his life, isn't it because he was also trying to perhaps perform a kind of masculinity that the Roman government felt threatened by? Sorry, isn't it also the case that Christ was trying to envision a kind of masculinity which was kinder, which was gentler? Um, I find it always extraordinary that a man should be killed simply because he's talking, because that is what Christ did most of the time. He just talked. And well, occasionally he performed a few miracles. He raised somebody from the dead once. He certainly multiplied fishes and loaves to feed people. But be that as it may, he walked on water. But be that as it may, most often he was just talking. And he was basically saying that, please allow the children to come to me. He was protesting against the stoning of a prostitute. So he was being a very, very anti-hegemonic man. Is that also why Christ had to pay for what he did with his life? Because his kind of masculinity was unacceptable. I have had requests to read from more of Andrew McMillan's poetry, so I will do that. Last time I had read from Playtime. Today I'll be reading from Physical. But before doing that, I would want to connect what I just said with the poem that I'm going to read now, because Christ was put to death. His body was stripped bare, and it was put up for public kind of display because he was being subversive, but he was not being combative. He was not some kind of a terrorist who was killing people or he was maiming people. He was not damaging lives. He was not destroying lives, and yet he had to pay for this. So there was something that was very, very disturbing about the peaceful, gentle way in which Christ performed his masculinity. And we link that to the poem that I'm going to read right now, which is "The Men Are Weeping in the Gym." And the reason why I want to do that is because this also connects with what I had said in my previous video, in which I said that a poet is a trainer. And he is forcing, or they are forcing, the members of the gym to work on their bodies till the body does something that it is otherwise not capable of doing. So that is the positive aspect of gymming. But what I'm going to read right now is the negative aspect of gymming, because you see, if you think about the public display of the semi-nude body of Christ, and if you link it to the public display of the semi-nude bodies of men who are posting pictures of themselves on Instagram, then I think it is going to become very interesting for us to understand how the male body is publicly displayed, and what are the changing politics of the display. When Christ's body was displayed, it was being displayed as an example of powerlessness. It was a message that was being sent out to the society, to the world at large, that, if you disobey, you will have to pay, like this. But and Christ himself, of course, had no agency. But in this case, when we are looking at men who are constantly putting up pictures of themselves after having worked out at the gym for 2 months, what we are looking at is the way in which men are self-objectifying themselves, and in doing that, they are sort of bringing upon themselves a kind of identity which I'm not terribly sure is terribly empowering. But that is what men are doing. And there is a way in which too much gymming can be ultimately destructive, and I think that is what this poem is about. The men are weeping in the gym. The men are weeping in the gym, using the hand dryer to cover their sobs. Their hearts have grown too big for their chests. Their chests have grown too big for their shirts. They are dressed like kids who have forgotten their games kit. They are crying in the toilet, and because they have built themselves as statues, this must mean that God has entered them. They are wringing their faces like sweat towels in the sink. Their veins are about to burst their banks. They are flooding out of themselves onto the tiles. They have turned water into protein shakes. They have got too close to the mirrors. They have got too close to the glass. And now they are laying in the broken pools of their own faces, the lines of them. At the decline press, the bicep curl, waiting, staring straight ahead, swearing that the wetness on their cheeks is perspiration, that the words they mutter as they lift are meaningless, that they feel nothing when the muscle tears itself from itself, that they don't hear the thousands of tiny fracturings needed to build something stronger. So here is a way in which men are torturing themselves, and they are clearly making themselves unhappy. They're weeping, they're crying, they're torturing themselves. So while it is good to be gymming, but then taken to an extreme, the gymming, instead of helping you, begins to feed on you. And I think that is where the problem is that this is about men who are being devoured by gymming. And so therefore, if you think of the powerless body of Christ, the body of Christ is also deeply powerful in the sense that that body is in communion with God. Although Christ, famously says, while he's about to die, his famous last words are, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" But as we know very well, that the moment when we think that God is not with us, that is when God is most with us. So therefore, there is a way in which Christ is empowered, knowingly or unknowingly, through his very keen awareness of the divine. And these men who are physically empowered are actually disempowered, because they are now becoming victims of a regime that they had originally thought would empower them. I hope you enjoyed reading this poem with me. There is another poem by Andrew McMillan that I will read, after which I shall move on to other poets. Thank you very much.